The alarm on my wrist unit had not even finished its first buzz when I felt the floor of the docking bay shake under 4 heavy footsteps, and I already knew who was coming. Cragvell never walked. He stomped, like the station owed him the sound of his own arrival. I was crouched behind a supply crate, running a diagnostic on a fuel line, and I did not look up right away, because looking up at Cragvell was usually a mistake. He was Drennick, tall enough to block out the overhead lights, with 4 arms that could bend steel plating for fun, and a grudge against every soft-skinned species on this station, humans most of all. I am not human myself. I am Fesseri, small, feathered, built for talking my way out of trouble rather than into it, which made me exactly the kind of person Crag liked to push around. But that morning, he was not looking for me. He was looking for someone new. Her name was Grace Bennett, and she had been on the station for 11 days. She worked in propulsion maintenance, she smiled at strangers, and she had already made more friends in less than 2 weeks than Crag had made in 6 years. I think that was the real problem. Not her strength, not her skill. Just the simple fact that people liked her, and people did not like him, and he could not stand the difference. I stood up slowly from behind the crate, and that is when I saw her, walking across the open floor of the bay with a tray of tools balanced in one hand, heading toward the same corridor Crag had just stormed into. My chest went tight. I wanted to call out to her, warn her, tell her to take the long way around, but my voice caught somewhere behind my throat, and before I could push a single word out, Crag had already turned the corner and planted himself directly in her path. She stopped, not out of fear, just the ordinary pause anyone makes when a very large person suddenly blocks the only way forward. "Good morning," she said, calm as anything, like she was greeting a neighbor over a fence instead of a mountain of muscle with a bad attitude. Crag did not answer. He looked her up and down the way he always did with new arrivals, deciding how much space he could take from them before they broke. Then he reached out with one of his lower arms and knocked the tray straight out of her hand. Tools scattered across the deck plating, ringing out in every direction, a wrench spinning off toward the wall, a set of couplings rolling under a nearby console. The sound seemed to echo far longer than it should have, bouncing off metal walls, and for a moment nobody in that bay moved. Everyone had learned, the hard way, that getting involved with Cragvell cost more than it was worth. I stayed frozen behind my crate, heart pounding, watching. Grace looked down at her scattered tools, then back up at him, and here is the part that still surprises me every time I think about it. She smiled. "Guess you'll be helping me pick those up," she said. I do not think Crag expected that. He had built his whole reputation on the fear that came after moments like this one. People apologized to him. People backed away. Nobody ever smiled. Something shifted in his face, a kind of confusion sliding fast into anger, and before anyone could step between them, his upper right arm swung around in a wide, heavy arc, aimed straight at the side of her head. I could not watch. I actually turned my face away, bracing for a sound I did not want to hear. But the sound never came. When I looked back, Grace had moved, just barely, just enough. She had tilted her head to one side, letting the arc of motion pass close enough to stir her hair, but never touching her at all. She had read the whole movement before it even finished, the way you read a sentence you already know the ending to. Crag's momentum carried him half a step past her, off balance for one single heartbeat, and that was all the time she needed. She stepped in close, caught his outstretched arm at the wrist with both hands, turned her hips, and guided him past her, using his own weight and force against him rather than adding any of her own. It was not a battle of strength. It was barely a battle at all. It looked almost gentle, like she was showing him a new direction to walk in, except that direction ended with him meeting the deck plating with a heavy, final sound. The whole bay went silent. Even the background hum of the station's ventilation system seemed to fade into the background of that silence. Crag lay there for a moment, all 4 arms spread out across the floor, his face somewhere between shock and disbelief. Nobody moved to help him. Nobody moved at all. Grace crouched down near him, not close enough to threaten, just close enough to be heard clearly. "You all right?" she asked, and her voice held no mockery in it at all, only the same steady calm she had carried since she first said good morning to him. He did not answer. I am not sure he could, not yet. She stood, brushed the dust off her knees, and turned to gather her scattered tools, one at a time, as if the last 10 seconds had been nothing more than an ordinary interruption to an ordinary morning. I found the courage to step out from behind my crate then, and I knelt down to help her pick up the couplings that had rolled toward the wall. My hands were shaking. Hers were not. "You all right?" I asked her, echoing her own question back at her without meaning to. She looked at me and smiled again, the same easy smile she had given Crag only moments before. I am fine, she said. Thank you for asking. I wanted to ask her 100 questions right there on the spot, but station security arrived before I got the chance, moving in fast once word had spread through the internal channels. 2 officers, 1 human, 1 Zeth, both looking between Crag still recovering on the floor, and Grace calmly stacking tools back onto her tray. What happened here? The human officer asked, directing the question at no one in particular. Before Grace could answer, Crag pushed himself up onto one knee and pointed a shaking arm toward her. She attacked me, he said, his voice rough with something between anger and embarrassment, unprovoked. I want that logged. The officers exchanged a look, the kind of look that told me they had heard complaints about Crag before, plenty of them, and had never quite been able to do anything about it because of who backed his clan's mining contracts on this station. We will need the footage from this corridor, the Zeth officer said, already tapping commands into a handheld unit. The footage came up fast. Station security here worked efficiently when they were not busy avoiding a fight nobody wanted to start. The recording played out exactly as I remembered it, Crag striking first, swinging without warning, and Grace simply stepping aside and redirecting his own force back against him. No punches thrown by her, no strikes, nothing but movement, timing, and control. The human officer looked up from the screen toward Crag, and this time there was no confusion in his expression at all. You want that logged? He asked flatly. Because I am happy to log exactly what I just watched. Crag said nothing. He pushed himself up to his full height, gathered whatever pride he had left scattered across the deck plating along with his dignity, and walked away without another word, his footsteps far quieter this time than they had been on his way in. I stayed with Grace while the officers finished their questions, and once they had gone, I finally asked her the thing that had been sitting in my chest since the moment his arm swung toward her head. Were you scared? I asked. She thought about the question for longer than I expected, like it deserved a real answer instead of a quick one. A little, she admitted, but being scared and being ready are not the same thing. You can feel both at once. Most people do, right up until the moment something actually happens, and then it turns out the fear does not stop you from doing what you already know how to do. I asked her where she had learned to move like that, expecting some story about military training or special operations, the kind of thing you hear about in old recordings from Earth's history channels. She just shrugged. My grandmother taught me, back home, she said. She used to say that the whole point of learning how to defend yourself was so you would never have to prove it to anyone. You just needed to know you could, and that was usually enough to keep you calm when it actually mattered. Word of what happened spread through the station faster than any official report could travel. By the time the next shift began, half the crew already knew the story, and most of them had already turned it into something bigger than it actually was, adding details that never happened, exaggerating a moment that had already been remarkable enough on its own. Crag did not show his face in the common areas for 3 full days after that. When he finally did return, he kept to the far side of every room, said nothing to anyone, and left the moment his shift ended. The stomping footsteps I used to hear echoing down the corridors had gone quiet. I want to tell you it ended there, simple and clean, but stations like ours rarely let anything stay simple for long. 5 days later, a supply shuttle from Crag's own clan docked at our station, carrying 2 of his older relatives, both of them ranking members of the clan council that controlled the mining rights on 2 moons in our system. I happened to be on shift near the docking arm when they arrived, and I recognized the tension in their posture immediately, the same tension Crag carried whenever he walked into a room expecting trouble. They requested a formal meeting with station leadership, and word came down fast that Grace had been asked to attend as well, along with the 2 security officers who had responded to the original incident. I was not supposed to be in that meeting room, but I found a reason to deliver a maintenance report to the outer office at exactly the right time, and I stood close enough to the open door to hear most of what happened inside. The older Drennick, whose name I later learned was Vel, Crag's uncle, spoke first, his voice heavy and slow, the way most Drennick voices were when they wanted to sound serious. My nephew has told us his own version of events, Orsk said. We would like to understand the full picture before any further reports are filed with the Regional Trade Authority. The human station administrator, a quiet woman named Alice Marsh who rarely raised her voice for anything, simply gestured toward a wall screen and played the recorded footage without a single word of explanation. The room went quiet while it played. I could not see the screen from where I stood, but I could hear the small shift in the air when it finished, the particular kind of silence that follows watching something you did not expect to be true. Orsk did not speak for a long moment. When he finally did, his voice had lost most of the weight it carried before. My nephew struck first, he said, more to himself than to the room. He did, Alice Marsh confirmed, without provocation. The engineer defended herself and caused no lasting harm, despite having every opportunity to do so. The second Drennick elder, a quieter figure who had not spoken yet, finally leaned forward. "And you say she showed restraint even after he struck her?" he asked, directing the question toward Grace herself. I heard Grace's voice for the first time in that room, steady as ever. "I did not want to hurt him," she said. "I just did not want to get hurt either. There is a difference, and I think it matters." The room fell quiet again, and this time the silence lasted even longer. Orsk finally spoke, his voice carrying something closer to respect than the anger he had walked in with. "My nephew has caused difficulty on this station before today," he admitted. "We have heard complaints, and we did not always act on them the way we should have. This will not happen again." I do not know exactly what was said after that because my presence near the door had drawn a curious glance from one of the officers, and I decided it was time to find somewhere else to be. But the outcome became clear within the day. Cragg was reassigned to a different post, far from this station, and a formal apology was issued not only to Grace but to every crew member who had ever filed a quiet complaint against him that nobody had followed up on. I saw Grace again that evening in the common dining area, sitting near a window that looked out over the slow curve of the nearest moon, its surface catching the light from our system's star in a pale silver glow. I sat down across from her, still turning the whole day over in my mind. "Did you know it would end like this?" I asked her. "When it started, I mean. Did you know his whole family would show up? That it would turn into something this big?" She smiled, the same easy smile I had come to recognize as simply part of who she was. "No," she said. "I did not know any of that. I just knew what was happening in that one moment, and I knew I could handle it without making things worse than they needed to be. Everything after that was out of my hands." I thought about that answer for a long time afterward, long after Grace had finished her shift rotation and eventually transferred to a different post entirely, moving on the way people on stations like ours always eventually do. I have served with many species since that day, across different stations and different systems, and I have watched plenty of confrontations unfold in corridors and common rooms and docking bays, most of them forgettable, a few of them not. But I still think about that one morning more than almost any other memory I carry from those years. Not because of what Cragg did, because bullies like him exist everywhere, in every species, on every station, and they rarely change until someone finally stands their ground against them. I think about it because of what Grace did instead. She did not seek out the confrontation. She did not want it, did not provoke it, and clearly took no pleasure from the outcome even after everything was resolved in her favor. She simply refused to be intimidated, met the moment with calm instead of fear, and let her own preparation speak for itself when the moment demanded it. Humans have a way of doing that, I have learned since. You arrive on stations like ours looking unremarkable by the standards of larger, stronger species, easy to underestimate, easy to dismiss as soft or breakable. And then, when the moment actually arrives, when everything is on the line and there is no more time left for hesitation, you show a kind of steadiness that very few other species manage to carry with them into difficult moments. I do not know where Grace Bennett serves today, or what station holds her now, or what new challenges she has faced since the last time I saw her sitting near that window, with the moon's pale light on her face. But I know this much for certain. Somewhere out there, some other person is underestimating her all over again, assuming her calm expression means she has nothing behind it. They are wrong, of course. They always are. And somewhere out there, I hope, she is still smiling the same easy smile she gave to Cragg Vell that morning, right before she showed him exactly how wrong he had been about her all along.